So a player that didn't do well would go, man, that's out. Why am I playing so off? Jeez. The player that plays well goes, 3 inches to the left. Pull that in. See the difference between those two? Positive psychology was developed by Martin Seligman, who was a professor at Penn. Actually, he was named the president of the American Psychological Association. You have to be this is a voted position, okay? And this was like in 1998. So almost 30 years ago, like 27, 28 years ago. At the time, psychology basically only studied things that were kind of suboptimal, frankly speaking. It was if you wanted to have a neurosis or psychosis, they could tell you how to do it. But they really couldn't tell you much about healthy people. So he said, we need to study positive psychology, which is not a positive attitude, although there's components of that. But positive psychology is like, what do healthy people do, and how can we emulate those behaviors? One of the biggest things he found was virtue, by the way. The scientific community rejected the idea of virtue for 100 years because there's a little bit of an illusion that God might be a part of that, and they don't like that. So they rejected it. But he did so many studies on it that, he was like, virtue is like at the core of this. And it's interesting. So forward thinking uses components of positive psychology, but it also uses a couple of other techniques that are not necessarily part of it. We have all had the experience of not telling somebody to what is the term that it was used on Friends? I think that's what it was, right? In Friends, remember the show Friends? The brother and sister, they go like this to each other, and we kind of know what that might have meant. We've all had the experience of not telling somebody this, right? Why? Because what did you do? You held your tongue, right? Now, you may have had the experience of telling somebody that, okay? Or giving the, one finger peace symbol while you're driving, okay? So what is the difference between when you did that and you didn't do it? Well, now, if you did it and you were like, that was good, true, and in that circumstance, beautiful, and that guy had it coming, well, Jesus did turn over the tables. There was a time, maybe not for that specifically, but there's a time to fight, okay? But if you were like, that was wrong, I shouldn't have done it, and then you were like, I didn't do it, and that was good, I'm glad I had self-control. There is something that happened there, and it's like this 2-second pause, wouldn't you agree? Where you were like, you were going to say it, and then something stopped you. Analyzing what took place there to intentionally harness it is super important to practice. Now, if you have high self-control, high emotional stability, you have already do this effectively. Now, I happen to test low on neuroticism, meaning I'm emotionally stable. But one of the reasons I think this is an important insight is because despite the fact that I test there, boy, I'm challenged by that thing all the time. So if you have less emotional stability, you're probably really challenged by it, meaning all of us are challenged by it. We have to have self-control. Now, a lot of the place that self-control comes from is this, okay, building these. But there's techniques we can use, right? If you're going to learn to become strong, you're going to know the techniques of eating and lifting weights. If you're going to become virtuous or optimized or maximize your personality, techniques are good. So if you can just learn to recognize the thing that triggers you and pause, stop for 2 seconds, that right there is not always enough, but now you need to do something called controlled directional thinking. You're doing this anyway. I call it CTD, or CDT, controlled directional thinking. What is that? You're either going to give yourself a statement, a question, or a command at that moment. Now, I did something pretty interesting with my golf game. Who here golfs? You see that golf simulator down there? Okay.
Pretty sick.
Yeah, it's a pretty good golf simulator. I shoot 110 every time I golf. It doesn't matter what I shoot on the front nine, I will make it up on the back nine to equal off 110. When I got the golf simulator, it was the same thing. My friends, most of them golf in the low 80s. And so they'd come over here and they'd beat me up. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to take some of these things that I teach and I develop and I'm going to apply it to golf. I never really cared much about golf. Within 3 weeks and only 4 rounds, I brought my game down to 85. And with witnesses, by the way, okay? And I did it with one simple thing, and it was controlled directional thinking, okay? A 2-second pause, controlled directional thinking. So I examined my game. Now, I did not do anything like head down, blah, 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 okay? What I did was, as I walked up to the ball, I went, I have the most amazing life. I can't even believe that I have this place. and my wife is amazing. And that was it. That's all I did. And when I learned what to say to myself, when I went up to hit the ball, I immediately went down to shooting the 85. At first, I was fumbling around with what I was going to do to get there, and then all of a sudden, I just tracked there. Now, there's a skill aspect. 4 rounds for me in 3 weeks, and it wasn't just 4 rounds. It was like I probably, some days I was playing, 36 or whatever. It was 4 times I golfed. So if I went back to the golf simulator right now, I'd probably shoot like a 95 or a 98 or whatever, and then in 2 rounds I'd come back down. Because there's an actual physical component along with the psychological component. Those things are real. And by the way, to give you an idea of how this simulated environment that I was in it needs to go further than that in real life. Is like, then I went to golf on a real course, and it just turns out I'm good at a video game. Okay, I mean, so it's like, you don't want to be unrealistic about what these things can and cannot do, but they have a certain power about them that is amazing. And I do know that if I applied it to a regular golf course in the same way over time, I would get better. Not quite that better. Why? Because here, same environment, same weather, everything is exactly identical the way you want it to be, where there's different things you have to adjust there on a physical realm. And by the way, they also create different mental habits. So if I'm in a flat surface and I'm going to say something, now I'm on a hill or in the sand, I'm tempted to screw up that thing, aren't I? Now, the reason that thing that I did works is because, and Daniel Kahneman did a lot of work on this, but there are many others, where we have 2 systems in our mind. We have system 1 and system 2. System 1 is the thing that automatically tells you how far away from me we are. When I put this book up, you didn't sound that out, did you? You just read it immediately, Leading Giants. But at some point in your life, you had to sound it out all the way through. And then it's automatic. Our system 2 mind is the one that's deliberate. It has to think. It's like if you're just walking along at a crisp pace, fine. System 1 mind, you're moving. Now somebody says, I want you to calculate this math equation. Your pace immediately slows down because you move into system 2 now. The idea is that you use an expertise model, how to learn expertise, and we've got something in here on that, in order to move things from system 2 to system 1. So you no longer have to read this, you know it immediately, instantaneously. So when you start to intentionally put in a 2-second pause and then give yourself a command. Mine was a statement. My life is great. I can't believe this. My wife is amazing. What did that do? When you have anxiety, your pupils dilate and your heart races almost immediately. Even simple questions can make somebody do that. There's a certain optimal level for that. Like, there's a certain amount of that increases performance, but if it goes too far, it decreases performance. And we also know that it can cause cortisol and all that kind of stuff that can really be problematic over time. You want to optimize that with your statements or give yourself a command. So there's a book named Inside the Game of Tennis. It's like 40 years old now. And Joe Galway, a great tennis coach, he noticed that there was something that great tennis players did. And they made assessments non-judgmentally. So a player that didn't do well would go, man, that's out. Why am I playing so off? Jeez. The player that plays well goes, 3 inches to the left. Pull that in. See the difference between those two? It's like if you were programming your computer and you weren't getting the answer that you want, you're like, geez, why? What the hell? And typing that, you think you're going to get an answer? No. You develop by saying specifically what you want, the way you want it. And that changes it. And that's an optimization that takes place. So these things show you how to optimize those things. Forward thinking is included in there. But then it also is happiness maturity. There are certain levels of happiness that we are stuck on. We are either fixated on short-term, immediate, physical gratification, eat, drink, smoke, have sex, these things that make us feel good right away, which, by the way, in order are good things, but out of order cause chaos in your life. The second was like an ego comparative or achievement, win a gold medal, write a great book, make $1 million, these things. Those are also good in order, as long as you know what they're supposed to give you. Then there's philanthropic or gratitude or giving. That's the next level. And then there's transcendental. Ultimately, our hearts are restless until they're resting you, right? It goes you all the way to the top. So what happens is, as you go through these processes, each one of us is like happiness default at a certain level. I'm unhappy, I'm doing this. Now, all of us can harness each one of them if they are in order, right? Like at the end of a long day, a person who's optimized with transcendental will still maybe have a glass of wine, okay? But that person who's not optimized is not going to wait till the evening to have one glass of wine. They're going to start in the morning, okay? They're going to just hide through that. So it's helping people get to those levels.